Hello and welcome to this video on Act 2, Scene 2 of Macbeth. This is the second video on this scene because there's an awful lot to cover in this one, being the murder scene after all. In the first video on this scene, we looked at the characterization of Lady Macbeth, and in this one, we're going to look at Macbeth himself. So before we get started, I want you to stop the video and brain dump what you already know about Macbeth. So take about 5 minutes to jot down all of your thoughts. That could be words, it could be things that he does in the play, it could be quotations, and then start the video again when you're ready. Okay, so this is what we've covered already about this character. In Act 1, Scene 2, he was praised as being a really courageous, a really brave and patriotic hero. Patriotic means he was loyal to Scotland, loyal to King Duncan. And Macbeth doesn't actually appear in that scene, but we hear about how he's demonstrated these qualities by defeating the Norwegian invaders. And as a reward, Duncan says that Macbeth is going to be the next Thane of Cawdor. Now, Macbeth isn't there, he doesn't hear this bit of information, and that's really crucial for what happens in the next scene. In Act 1, Scene 3, Macbeth receives the prophecies and then the news that he is now the Thane of Cawdor. So first of all, the witches tell him he's going to be Thane of Glamis, Thane of Cawdor, and King of Scotland. And Macbeth thinks this is absolutely outrageous. The first prophecy doesn't worry him quite so much because he's already inherited the title of Thane of Glamis from his father, who died. But Thane of Cawdor and King of Scotland, he thinks this could never happen. But then the witches go, and immediately the messengers from Duncan arrive and tell Macbeth that he is Thane of Cawdor. Now, this convinces him that the witches must be telling the truth. Then, at that point, the horrid image of murder appears in Macbeth's mind. He's already thinking, well, if one of the prophecies has come true, then the other one might come true. And how can I get there? Well, I can get there by killing the king. So whilst in Act 1, Scene 2, he's really courageous and patriotic, that's juxtaposed in Act 1, Scene 3, where Macbeth is really easily manipulated, he's easily convinced, and he's already thinking about betraying his king. In Act 1, Scene 4, he returns to the court, and here he's not made heir to the throne of Scotland. Now, this takes a little bit of explaining because these days we know that the next king or queen is going to be the oldest child. So, for example, Charles was the oldest child, so he's inherited. His oldest child is Prince William, so he's going to be the next king. But at this point in time in Scotland, this law of primogeniture doesn't hold. So the king chooses who his heir is going to be. And in a kind of warmongering society where there's lots of conflict, it would make sense to pick the person who's the strongest military leader. So actually, Macbeth is in with a really good chance of being heir to the throne. However, Duncan chooses his oldest son, Malcolm, and Malcolm becomes heir, or what's called the Prince of Cumberland in the play. Now, at this point, the only way for Macbeth to become king is therefore to murder King Duncan and to somehow get rid of Malcolm as well. So he becomes wrapped by his black and deep desires. He's totally obsessed with this idea of regicide. So we could describe him at this point as being incredibly deceptive. He has a facade of loyalty, but in reality, he's becoming corrupt and malevolent underneath that. He then writes a letter to Lady Macbeth telling her what's happened, and she becomes really worried because she's ambitious for her husband too, but she thinks that he's too full of the milk of human kindness to catch the nearest way. That is, he's too compassionate, he's too caring to catch the nearest way, well, to get the nearest way to the throne, which is by killing Duncan. However, they go ahead with the plan and they're going to murder the king. But then in Act 1, Scene 7, Macbeth has second thoughts. He dithers, he decides not to commit the regicide, and Lady Macbeth convinces him to proceed with the plan. She does this by metaphorically emasculating him. So she says, when you durst do it, then you were a man. As in, you need to prove your masculinity to me by killing the king and by taking the throne from him. So at this point, we see that Macbeth is changeable, he's not reliable, he's quite afraid, he's worried, and he's easily manipulated by his wife. And she uses his vanity and his fear of being emasculated to do that. Then in Act 2, Scene 1, that's the dagger scene. So he sees a dagger which marshals him to Duncan's bedchamber. And at this point, he's committed to the murder, but he's still full of horror with what he's about to do. So that's where we left Macbeth's story, and we're going to pick that up in Act 2, Scene 2. But before we do that, just another quick check. I want you to stop the video, write down the definitions of these words, and then start the video again when you're ready. Okay, so number 1, courageous means brave. Patriotic is loyal to the king. To be manipulated is to be easily convinced or easily kind of guided in a particular direction. Emasculated means someone's masculinity is stripped away from them. Tormented means that they're kind of mentally horrified or distraught or really upset by something. And remorseful means to feel guilty. Okay, so this is halfway through Act 2, Scene 2. As I said earlier, we read the first half of this scene in the previous video. So if you haven't read that, then go back and check that video out. So at this point, Macbeth has murdered Duncan, he's come out of Duncan's bedchamber, and he's looking at the blood that covers his hands, and he says, "This is a sorry sight." So already, moments after the murder has happened, Macbeth feels incredibly remorseful about what he's done. And Lady Macbeth says a foolish thought to say a sorry sight. We've planned this, we decided this, get over yourself. And Macbeth replies, "There's one did laugh in his sleep, and one cried murder, that they did wake each other. I stood and heard them, that they did say their prayers and address them again to sleep." Lady Macbeth, really practical, "There were two lodged together." Macbeth, "One cried, 'God bless us,' and 'Amen.' The other, as they had seen me with these hangman's hands, listening their fear. I could not say 'Amen' when they did say 'God bless us.'" Lady Macbeth says, "Consider it not so deeply." She tells him not to think about this, but Macbeth continues, he's really spiralling here. "But wherefore could I not pronounce 'Amen'? I had most need of blessing, and 'Amen' stuck in my throat." Now, you might not use the word "Amen" that frequently, but you might have heard it in the context of finishing off a prayer. So, for example, a Christian would pray to God and they'd finish it with "Amen," or if they were listening to someone else praying, everybody in the room would say "Amen" all together. So the fact that Macbeth cannot say "Amen" means that he thinks that his connection with God has been broken. He's not able to pray anymore. And that is literally true because he's just broken the divine right of kings by killing King Duncan. So he's challenged God's authority at this point, hence he can't pray properly anymore. Lady Macbeth tells her husband to calm down. She says these deeds must not be thought after these ways, so it will make us mad. But Macbeth doesn't calm down, he continues. "Methought I heard a voice cry, 'Sleep no more. Macbeth does murder sleep, the innocent sleep, sleep that knits up the ravelled sleeve of care, the death of each day's life, sore labour's bath, balm of hurt minds, great nature's second course, chief nourisher in life's feast.'" And I love this line from Lady Macbeth. She says, "What do you mean?" And then Macbeth continues trying to explain this. "Still it cried, 'Sleep no more,' to all the house. Glamis hath murdered sleep, and therefore Cawdor shall sleep no more. Macbeth shall sleep no more." And Lady Macbeth, looking at this from a really practical side, who was it that thus cried? "Why, worthy Thane, you do unbend your noble strength to think so brain-sickly of things. Go get some water and wash this filthy witness from your hand. Why did you bring the daggers from this place? They must lie there. Go carry them and smear the sleepy grooms with blood." So as well as not being able to say "Amen," Macbeth knows that he's not going to be able to sleep again. And Lady Macbeth responds to this in a really practical way. She's focused on the evidence, getting rid of the blood, getting rid of the daggers, making sure that there's no kind of physical evidence to pin this on them. And Macbeth insists, "I'll go no more. I am afraid to think what I have done. Look on it again, I dare not." So Lady Macbeth has told him to take the daggers back to where the murder is and leave them there, and Macbeth just absolutely refuses to do this. Okay, pause the video and jot down a couple of thoughts. What is Macbeth's initial response to the murder? And then start the video again when you're ready. So Macbeth's initial response is really that he's worried, he's upset, he's remorseful, he's distressed. He thinks he's broken his connection to God, he thinks he can't sleep anymore, and he absolutely refuses to return the daggers to the murder scene because he doesn't want to look at Duncan's body. So he's just trying to block out everything that's just happened. Right, let's continue reading. So Lady Macbeth's response to her husband is just to be absolutely appalled at his weakness. And she says, infirm of purpose, give me the daggers. The sleeping and the dead are but as pictures. So she says, right, if you're not going to do it, I will take the daggers back. Let's not worry about the dead body. It's just as if it was a picture. It doesn't mean anything. And she continues, "'Tis the eye of childhood that fears a painted devil. If he do bleed, I'll gild the faces of the grooms withal, for it must seem their guild." So she's going to take the blood from Duncan's body and put it on the chamberlains, the servants who are supposed to be guarding him, in order to frame them. Lady Macbeth leaves, and then there's a knocking. And this knocking builds and builds throughout the scene to really build the tension. Someone is trying to get in, and that person might discover them in the act of trying to clean up from the murder. And Macbeth says, "Whence is that knocking? How is it with me when every noise appalls me? What hands are here? Ha, they pluck out mine eyes. Will all great Neptune's ocean wash this blood clean from my hand? No, this my hand will rather the multitudinous seas incarnadine, making the green run red." So Lady Macbeth has gone off to sort the daggers out, and Macbeth, instead of just washing his hands, is dwelling on the blood. He's totally fixated by the blood that's on his hands. He says, "Will all great Neptune's ocean wash this blood clean from my hand?" Now, in mythology, Neptune is the god of the sea. So Macbeth is really exaggerating how much water he's going to need to wash his hands. He thinks he needs the whole sea to clean himself up from this murder. And this use of hyperbole reveals just how remorseful Macbeth is at this point, just how much guilt he's feeling at what he's done. Lady Macbeth comes back and she said, "My hands are of your colour, but I shame to wear a heart so white." So again, she's trying to emasculate him. She's saying, my hands are covered in blood too, given what I've just done, but I would be ashamed to be someone like you. To have a heart so white is to be really fearful. The knocking continues, and she says, "I hear the knocking at the south entry. Retire we to our chamber. A little water clears us of this deed. How easy is it then?" So Shakespeare is juxtaposing Macbeth's belief that we need all the water in the world with Lady Macbeth's feeling that they only need a little tiny bit of water, and then quickly they can get rid of this blood, and with that the guilt that they're feeling. Lady Macbeth continues, "Your constancy hath left ye unattended. Hark, more knocking. Get on your nightgown, lest occasion call us, and show us to be watchers. Be not lost so pearly in your thoughts." And Macbeth finishes the scene. "To know my deed, 'twere best not to know myself. Wake, Duncan, with thy knocking. I wish that thou couldst." So he wants all of this to be undone and Duncan to be alive again, for the murder not to have been committed. Okay, another pause point for you. So I want you to think about how Macbeth has changed across the play. To help you out with this, I've put all the scenes where Macbeth appears or he's discussed, and I've given you a little bit of information about what happens in each scene. If we look at Act 1, Scene 2, I've done the full thing for you. So it says here that we hear how Macbeth wins the battle against the Norwegians, and I've said that here Macbeth is courageous, patriotic, he's a leader, he's respected, he's loyal. Okay, so stop the video, fill in the rest of the table, and then start the video again when you're ready. Right, so Act 1, Scene 3, Macbeth is easily manipulated, he's really ambitious, he's afraid of the horrid image of regicide. In Act 1, Scene 4, he's ambitious, he's bitter, murderous, really deceptive, he's thinking about killing Duncan. However, contrasting with that, in Act 1, Scene 5, Lady Macbeth admits her husband's weakness, even though he is ambitious. In Act 1, Scene 7, we see that weakness where he decides that he doesn't want to kill Duncan. However, we also see that he's really easily manipulated because Lady Macbeth persuades him to go through with it. Act 2, Scene 1, his brain is described as being heat oppressed. So here we see the start of the psychological impact of the murder. He's starting to become really mentally disturbed by what he's going to do. However, he is resolute. He's going to go through with the murderer, and he's kind of resigned to his fate. He knows this is going to go badly, but he feels like he can't get out of it. And then in Act 2, Scene 2, we see him being afraid, remorseful, absolutely horrified. So he's gone from being that really courageous, patriotic leader at the start of the play to being someone who's a guilty murderer and who's really remorseful and who's incredibly psychologically broken at this point. Okay, I'm going to stop the video here and check out the next one on the next scene.